boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. A closer look at Holly Holm's ring return, who she's going to be fighting, and what she's capable of. Footage of Yolanda Ochoa, otherwise known as Yolanda Gomez, was tricky to come by, hard to find.
Took some doing.
30 years old, and what immediately stood out as the fighters were side by side with each other was Yolanda's size compared to Holly Holm. She was noticeably taller and fuller, bigger bodied than Holly Holm, 10 years younger, over 10 years younger. Holly's 43. Yolanda is a very spry 30.
Holly sports a professional record of 33 wins with 2 losses, 3 draws, 9 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times in 37 professional bouts. Experience would so obviously go to Holly compared to Yolanda, who's got just 10 professional bouts, and those 10 bouts are against pedestrian-level competition. Only 1 recorded knockout.
So she's not exactly art to a better beef, but you know what they say about boxing?
What do they say?
There's more to boxing than what you see on paper. Seeing Yolanda Ochoa in action, I got the impression that while she may not be the strongest finisher, she is somewhat of a hard puncher. There's pop on there.
We'll get to that.
Yolanda's been keeping a nice, steady schedule of activity over the years. She fought 3 times last year, and she's already fought once, this one, back in March.
Now, as stated, this is against pedestrian-level competition. These are not high-level fighters, but at the same time, keeping busy and keeping active does more for Yolanda's reflexes than what we see from Holly. Holly hasn't been in a boxing match in over 12 years. And even though she has been fighting, that's in a different discipline, a different sport that requires somewhat different instincts and different muscle memory. You don't go about fighting in the octagon the same way you do as in the boxing ring.
Holly Holm's last 3 fights in a boxing ring. A very impressive run. A win over Anne-Sophie Mathies in what was their rematch. A young Deanna Prozac. A young, hard-punching Mary McGee.
Mary went on to become IBF champion.
Holly Holm beat her years ago in what was her final fight in a boxing ring in May of 2013. What is she going to be facing in Yolanda Ochoa, otherwise known as Yolanda Gomez? Well, this is a big girl.
Like I said, looking at them side by side with each other, what immediately stood out was Yolanda's size, Yolanda's frame, Yolanda's fullness. And now, having seen her in the boxing ring, she's a mid-range to inside fighter, a physical one.
She can punch, even though she doesn't have a lot of recorded knockouts. Maybe she's not the strongest finisher, but she can land with authority. See how she angles off, rolling and countering, slipping and countering. Very much an inside fighter, the prototypical Mexican slugger.
Not too fast, but does she need to be for a 43-year-old Holly Holm that hasn't boxed in over 12 years? Conventional wisdom would suggest that they're not going to match Holly too tough in what is her big comeback fight.
But then I thought about Josh Taylor's fight yesterday with Echo Essuman. For those not aware, Josh Taylor lost, and now he's coming off of 3 consecutive losses. That, in many ways, was his big comeback fight. His ascent to the welterweight division with all the ambition and all the intent to kick off a successful campaign, and just like that, it went sideways for him. He couldn't turn back the clock in his mid-30s. So Holly Holm is going to do that now? In her early 40s?
No, I understand that men do age differently than women do, though all the same, for a fighter in their early 40s who hasn't boxed in a very long time, hasn't used that particular skill set and those instincts, those reflexes.
I mean, I'm looking at Yolanda, and I'm looking at a handful, is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a big fighter who can handle themselves, mid-range to inside with a respectable punch, countering ability.
She's going to go for it against Holly. What I remember of Holly Holm in the boxing ring was she was a defensive fighter, a mover, a textbook boxer.
Somewhat of a pure boxer from out of the southpaw stance, which gives me the impression that Yolanda may end up being the aggressor and Holly may end up being the defender. Some emphasis on how Holly Holm is going to fight moving forward. She did say she means to tweak her style a bit. What she picked up from mixed martial arts over the years, she wants to incorporate some of that into her boxing for a sort of hybrid style.
We won't really know what that means or how that looks until the night of.
But having seen Yolanda in action for the first time, I get the impression that this is not a given and this is not a gimme fight. It's not a guarantee that Holly's big comeback goes well.
Yolanda looks capable enough to maybe ruin her plans.
We'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Gervonta Davis had a quite public blowout.
He's mad.
An adverse reaction to the homosexual advances of one of his supporters. A guy who goes by the name EJ Reloaded said, "He's so short and cute to me."
Gay. To which Gervonta Davis responded, "Learn to build a house, you effing claggot."
Claggot?
EJ Reloaded, very sad, said it was just a compliment, King. To which Gervonta responded, "Yo ass is gay. Stay your gay ass in your effing lane."
Claggot?
I've long maintained that the love affair that Gervonta Davis' supporters have with him has very little to do with his record, his boxing, and anything he did in a boxing ring. What it really is they are physically attracted to him. So anyone talking him up under that predication hardly passes for a boxing analyst, and that's hardly boxing analysis.
Gay.
Though at the same time, you can hardly blame them for gravitating towards Gervonta Davis when he's the same one who a few years ago was hugged up in a club with Adrian Bronier, blowing kisses at each other. Under what circumstances are two guys gonna be doing that unless they're butt buddies? Unless one is foraging in the other's brown eye like a coal miner would.
Gay.
What message do you send people when images like that are circulating on the internet for years while you're seen painting your nails and wearing furs, minks, wearing purses? This is not the image of masculinity, at least not the traditional one.
Gay.
You dress like you take it in the ass, Gervonta. So when people are writing you love letters, people like Boxing Ego, well, that's why. That's the message you sent them.
Claggot.
So it looks outwardly. I always got the impression that Gervonta Davis likes to play hide the peanut butter, pack the fudge.
His core audience seems to be a hybrid one of some boxing fans and some love and hip-hop supporters.
Resembles more of a rapper than a boxer, and by now we all know that hip-hop culture, for its hyper-aggressive and macho facade, is really just a charade disguising latent homosexuality.
Lil Zane, Cisco, Diddy, more famously.
With all of his bottles of baby oil, it's really no wonder why it's that target audience that gravitated towards Gervonta Davis of all people, Gervonta Davis of all boxers. It's not his boxing they care about. That's why they protect him so vehemently, irrespective of what career blemishes and poor decisions overmatched opponents.
It's all because they want to shag him, or get shagged by him, but that's what it really is.
All the same, bunch of guys that don't weigh no more than 120 pounds soaking wet, taking their shirts off, being in each other's company. What do you think that's about?
Come on.
And these are the guys that are willing to die on a hill defending Gervonta Davis. Not your hardcore boxing fan, not your true blue connoisseur of pugilism. It's these guys, like EJ Reloaded, whose own orientation is his own business. All I'm highlighting is when you're talking to these guys online, when you're arguing with them about Gervonta Davis's merits or the lack thereof, do understand these are not boxing fans, and you're not talking about boxing, you're talking about their man crush.
People are saying, hey, because of the corner situation with Tank, he wasn't, really focused. Have you been hearing some of that?
Yeah, you hear a lot of stuff. When the Tank was focused, man. Tank ain't trying to lose no fights. People can make up excuses all they want. It just won't happen on that night. You know what I'm saying? Tank was focused. Tank trained. Tank had a camp. He came in camp light. He came in camp, already close to his weight. He was training down here at Bangers Gym. Burry trains his fighters. Burry ain't gonna let up off of him. Calvin ain't gonna let up off of him. He had Kenny, Calvin, and Burry in the corner. Boogie as well. My man Bug was in there. So he had four good trainers right there working with him for this fight. So it's a slap in their face to say he wasn't focused and ready. He just met his match on March 1st.
That is Lamont Roach Sr., Lamont Roach's father, addressing the varying explanations for Gervonta Davis's lackluster showing in a fight that a lot of people think that he lost. It's entirely possible that Gervonta Davis's fire, the fire in the belly, it's diminished over time, and he doesn't have the hunger for the sport that he used to. He started off this year by saying this will be the last one he spends in the sport. So you imagine that if he would have beat Lamont Roach, he would have went into that Jake Paul fight right after that and sailed off into the sunset with all the money he made. But that's hardly an excuse for the fighter that they make him out to be.
Because they still make him out to be the best thing smoking. One of the best fighters in the sport. It's neither proven nor earned, but that doesn't stop people from saying it.
The pundits, the journos in the sport of boxing, particular to the American boxing scene, have had a hand in that. They didn't call him out enough. They built him up. They put him on a pedestal so that when he goes in there and looks like that with Lamont, it's supposed to be a shock.
Did Lamont all of a sudden get better? Is he that much better now than he was when he faced Jamel Herring? Jamel Herring beat this guy years ago, and nobody was falling out of their seat over it. So that years later, when Gervonta Davis can't beat him, can't get a decisive victory, gets a gift draw instead.
Oh, what? Lamont is suddenly this great fighter? He's pound for pound now? Because Gervonta couldn't handle him. Maybe you overestimated Gervonta, and maybe you're making excuses to reconcile that.
To reconcile your own overestimations of what is so obviously a souped-up American hype job.
If he is what you guys made him out to be, he shouldn't need 2 cracks at the apple for a super featherweight he brought up to lightweight, a super featherweight who's not even known for power where Tank is supposed to be.
Imagine you bring up Caleb Plant to the light heavyweight division to fight Ochoa better beef, and Ochoa can't put him away.
What would people say? No, Gervonta Davis has gotten a vote of confidence over the years that he never really deserved. I didn't figure myself that it would be Lamont Roach that brings it all to a head, but he did.
So that now in August, we're going to see the sequel. There's a lot of pressure on Gervonta Davis, and I don't think he's used to that. Not when it comes to his opponents, not when it comes to who he's fighting. He's been on easy street for a very, very long time. And that's what led him here. Stay there too long.
You lose your situational awareness, your sharpness, your killer instinct because you figure they're not putting you in there with killers. They're putting you in there with sacks of laundry that are going to drop off the first hard shot that lands. You came up against a guy, it's hard to land a hard shot on him. He can box. He can handle himself. Lamont Roach wanted it more than Gervonta Davis did. That's what I think that fight boils down to.
That's dangerous.
Said it in so many videos, so many times. This is not a job that you can do half-heartedly. This is not punching in a clock at your local McDonald's and going through the motions. If you don't want to be there in a boxing ring, it's gonna show. No matter how good you were, and when there are this many overestimations about how good you are, you're courting disaster every time you get out there.
They've been matching this guy baby soft for years. Creative matchmaking, weight stipulations, bringing up smaller fighters from lighter weights. And what about Frank Martin? How is that victory aging? That guy still ain't back.
Who the hell was he supposed to be anyway? What the hell had he done in the lightweight division up until that point that made him credible?
Nothing.
Zippo. Truthfully, I don't know what's gonna happen in August. Gervonta Davis losing to Lamont Roach, to me, is not outside the realm of possibility because he didn't anticipate needing a second fight. And when in Gervonta Davis's career has he ever had to adjust to an opponent? He's been matched so soft for so long, he might feel like a deer in the headlights right now. That Ochoa didn't get the job done? It didn't bail him out?
You're supposed to need 2 fights for 1 decisive win over Lamont Roach, and don't forget the gift draw that Gervonta should have a loss in the column right now.
Chicanery in the sport of boxing is the only reason that he doesn't, but in his own mind, he knows what happened, he knows why he took that knee, and he sees what people are saying. That's why he's not on social media as much as he usually is.
He's usually a lot more active.
Nothing would surprise me in August, but as far as I'm concerned, the damage is already done. If you are who they say you are, you should need 2 fights for 1 win over this guy.
In men's welterweight news, in a recent interview with Keith Idek, Brian Norman Jr., the WBO welterweight champion, states he wouldn't be mad at Jaron Ennis for choosing Teofimo because Turkey El Sheikh be paying. In his own words, he said, regarding him taking the fight, Norman told The Ring, I won't look at it as bad, and this is the main reason why. We're talking about Turkey. We all know Turkey be paying, so let's just say he gets paid $20 million or $15 million. Whatever he gets just to fight Teo. I would tell him, boy, you better go and take that money, or else I'm gonna do it. I wouldn't be mad at him at all. A sobering take, more sobering than anything we hear from Brian's father. And I appreciate that because it's honest and to the point. Something I think is missing in the American boxing scene from the American boxers. Brian hit the nail on the head. If they're gonna pay you that much money to fight Teofimo, why wouldn't you do it? None of the other champions are available.
And a fight with Teofimo would be a bigger fight against a bigger name with more of a profile than, say, a Barrios fight or even a Brian Norman fight, and certainly more than a Shakram Gayasov fight. That all of the ingredients to make it an attractive fight, including the money, are all there, so why wouldn't you do it? See, Brian is a lot more likable than his fast-talking father. I think the same is true of Floyd Schofield.
He's another fighter whose father talks too much and gets too much camera time. You see the father more than you see the son.
But if the sons would just do all their own talking without their fathers run and spin for them, perhaps they wouldn't get as much negative press, because the problem with Brian are the optics. You wouldn't go to Philly for Boots, you were averse to that, but you're gonna fly halfway around the world for Jin Sasaki, who doesn't even have a belt?
Looks like a stone cold duck.
So that under these circumstances, if Boots fights Teofimo while he waits, it's no harm and no foul. And I appreciate that from Brian Norman Jr., just being honest about it. If they're gonna pay you a fortune to fight a little guy moving up who hasn't had a knockout in what? 1-2 years?
This was the last time Teofimo knocked somebody out.
So Teofimo is an athletic fighter that seems to heavily rely on his athleticism, because in terms of X's and O's and fundamentals, he's not particularly strong in that department. What he has is speed and reflexes, counters and movement.
What his body allows him to do. The caveat is the same as true for Boots. Boots ain't that strong in the X's and O's department either. What he has is athleticism, but he's a naturally bigger man than Teofimo. The old saying goes, a good big man beats an equally good little man. Is Boots equally good to Teofimo?
Not in terms of resume. You have to give that to the Enduran. In the lightweight division, in the super lightweight division, he boasts a stronger resume, better names than anything you find on Jaron Ennis's resume. So far, the best guy that he fought was a quasi-active Amon Testanionis.
That's not better than Teo's win over then-champion Richard Comey, Vasil Lomachenko, Josh Taylor, his more recent win over Arnold Barbados, Hanna-Barbera. Teo has a much stronger resume than Boots. But what did I just say in my previous segment? There's more to boxing than what you see on paper, and there's a legitimate argument that against Boots, Teo might be biting off more than he can chew.
It's a dangerous fight. I think the most dangerous fight of his career, though simultaneously, if he can collect that scalp, there's no way to disparage it. There's no way to talk it down.
You can't say that he's an injury-prone fighter like Vasil Lomachenko or Josh Taylor. You can't say that he's inactive like Josh was.
So many have already made him out to be the best thing smoking in the welterweight division. Right now, that's the biggest scalp to collect, if Teo can collect it. The question is, can he?